Thanks for joining us once again. We focus today on the Tesla Semi and its recent entry into the Southern California market with the help of a customer that's called Pepsi. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the show, would like some better ideas on investing and trading, please join us on Patreon. So we opened today with some video of the Pepsi Tesla Semi moving through a college campus. I believe it's UC Davis. And it's kind of interesting to watch how delicately the driver can move through and around students as they cut in front of the vehicle. And I think it really illustrates a lot of the best qualities of the Tesla. Our thrust today is to focus on the fact that there's sort of some new developments that have come up for Tesla that seem minor, but they could be actually quite major, as we'll go through. So we have maybe 4 or 5 points that we'd like to go through, and that'll happen in the first 5-6 minutes of the show, and then the remainder of the show, the last 4 or 5 minutes, would be sort of implications of this. So the first thing that's happening today is that I wanted to report is that Pepsi is announcing that they've decided in their Riverside, California location to add 8 Tesla, they're calling them, instead of mega chargers, they're calling them Semichargers now. So Bakersfield is the location where they do produce drinks, but they also produce snacks at that facility. To date, what's been happening is that vehicles have been initially starting in the Sacramento area and then down to Fresno, and now we're down to Riverside. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, where we are now is that the California Air Resources Board is offering a deal where by 2035, all of the big rigs have to be electric. Between here and then, they're offering incentives where they're helping to pay for a portion of the fleet upgrades. So the first group or fleet that they've been targeting is what's called drayage. That's changing to electric or other zero EV vehicles for the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, and simply adding a fee to the freight that's coming off of the water as a way to pay for, partially pay for that. But as you know, part of the VW settlement, that money is being used and allocated to all the trucking companies as part of how they plan to make this transition. So the first part is drayage. Obviously, Tesla's not involved in the drayage process of containers off the ships and inland. The second part of this is that I have been kind of stunned at the decision of sort of Tesla/Pepsi to initiate their California presence of these vehicles in Fresno and Sacramento for a whole host of reasons. But the main number one reason is that Greater Los Angeles has some of the largest amount of pollution anywhere on planet Earth. So I found it very strange that the effort to put up, let's say, 100 trucks out there, and the process of the reduction in pollution caused by trucks wouldn't be started where in LA you have greater than 40 million people, in Greater Los Angeles, in the Sacramento area, you have, perhaps 3 million people. So even when those trucks are doing deliveries, there's less traffic for them to go through, definitely the case. But the impact that pollution reduction is going to have is far greater in Southern Cal. So I do believe that it's an excellent decision for them to put these in. Item number 2, at between $1 and $1.5 million per semi-charger, putting in 8 of those babies let's call it, between 10 and $15 million as an installation. So it's my belief that, you don't want to install stuff that's not going to get used. So the way things are looking is that Tesla is going to meet the remaining of the truck needs short term that Tesla or Pepsi may have with the Semi, but this also illustrates the point that if you look at California or greater West Coast, but primarily California and primarily greater Los Angeles, the money is there to buy those vehicles because of the assist from the state. And, Tesla has, or Pepsi has approximately 10,000 vehicles moving product throughout the United States. And in California, based on, California's population being something like, 50 million people, 55 million out of the 300 million in the United States, and their goals relative to pollution, it's my belief that we can expect that there'll be efforts made by the Pepsi folks to be at the head of the line, to be fully built out with their electric trucks before other entities get a hold of theirs, in theory. And so I bring this kind of up right now because we're entering what I call the Ferrari zone for the Tesla Semi. As you may know, Ferrari has a thing where you can theoretically buy a new Ferrari, but there's a process where you have to first be approved, and then you have to maybe purchase a lower level Ferrari. And if the factory likes how you handled that vehicle, they will offer you higher end Ferraris over time, depending on the kind of customer you've been. In the case of Tesla, I bring up the Ferrari analysis because it has been very difficult to get a hold of the semis. Right now, the Tesla Semi is in a production run somewhere around 100 semis a month are being produced in the smaller factory in Reno. The recipients of those have been sort of test customers who paid a lot of money 7-8 years ago to get a hold of their semis and have not gotten them. So what's happening is that those folks are now getting sort of a test supply, call it Walmart, call it DHL, call it even UPS. And sort of the next phase will be, you were a good customer in round one, we'll now start giving you allocation as we're getting to production. So I call it Ferrari analogy because you're kind of being graded on the initial encounter and then subsequently how you handle your affairs, whether or not you get priority in the line. What I really wanted to bring up today is the fact that there's been a question mark out there about how Tesla would handle its fleet, or certainly Tesla, but how Pepsi would handle their fleet and its expansion to other locations relative to deliveries for both snacks as well as for beverages. And the way it's looking right now is that they're planning on not bringing other vendors at the semi level other than Tesla, and trying to make the complete transition from ICE vehicles over to electric trucks and delivery, and do so over the next, I guess they have 10 years now to get that all done. But by installing these semi-chargers, we're now setting up for a situation where more of their fleet can switch over. So the ratio in the case of cars is, if you're in a neighborhood in California, let's say, and there are 6 people that all have a Tesla within a small area, there was an offer made, and I don't know if it's still the case, that for every time there are 6 or more Teslas in a group at a company, you now have the right to have a supercharger installed there so that you could cycle vehicles in and out of the supercharger a lot faster than just do your home charging. So in the case of the semi-chargers at $1.5 million a pop, that's a lot of capital to tie up if you're not planning on, let's say, something in 5 to 10 trucks per charger. So in theory, 8 chargers, 10 trucks a piece is 80 vehicles that might emanate from that spot. And, you know, given the other charging facilities they've installed and the number of vehicles being used at them, it looks like they're serious about moving, you know, between 1 and let's say 2,000 trucks that are currently ICE vehicles over to electric vehicles, and Tesla is going to be sort of the primary partner in doing that. You should also be noted here that not only is there a Riverside location for these chargers being installed, and that helps out in terms of, you know, there's a Fresno plant, and if you deliver product from Fresno to Riverside, now you have charging, rapid charging available. Tesla's also been making a point of installing charging along I-5, and within 8 miles of where the Riverside production facility is for Pepsi, there's actually a supercharger facility there for cars, but there's also a group of chargers installed for semis there as part of the process of setting up a semi-charging network that would run from San Jose through the greater LA area all the way out to Texas and the plant there. So the bottom line here is that Pepsi is very serious about being the leader in the transition to electric trucking using Tesla Semi. They're installing all the equipment necessary to be sort of the lead entity in this process. And I think it's terrific because now we're going to see hundreds initially of trucks entering the Southern California market, and the pollution impact will be significant and I think positive, and it's great for the area to have these vehicles being installed. So the only fly in the ointment that I see is that a lot of the fleets are going to have to maintain both ICE and electric vehicles longer than they'd like because of how slowly we're ramping for truck production. It is my hope, and perhaps we have a couple of Tesla folks watching us, that Tesla considers shutting down one, if not 2 factories, particularly the one in Texas with Cybertruck sales being slow, so that we can do sort of pop-up production of the Tesla Semi so that we can increase the size of the fleets faster, because that way more customers can get their vehicles, and while the subsidies are available, they don't disappear by competing entities sort of snagging the credits or sort of freebie deals for the fleet transition to electric vehicles in the process. So in general, congrats on the Semi coming online. Congrats on it being a great vehicle. Congrats on the 500 to 600 miles of range versus 200 to 300 for competitors. The only concern I have is if you're bogged down filling domestic needs of the United States, how and when are those vehicles ever going to arrive in Europe? Which is why I think some transition to production of Semi at other factories is in order. Once again, I want to thank you for joining us on our sort of Semi discussion for the day. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Look forward to any comments. Please take time to like and subscribe, and comments are always appreciated. For our health tips for today, I wanted to remind you of the 25 legless a day, limiting the chance that you're going to have knee issues, and it will strengthen your quad muscles. Also wanted to encourage you to note your intake of sort of electrolytes added to your water consumption, activity as well on a daily basis. Once again, thanks for joining us. Tschüss, au revoir, namaste. And in Jamaica, we say, enough respect, walk good man. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, and bye for now.